I asked when the wedding would be, and my daughter-in-law smiled sweetly and said, "We got married yesterday." The words hung in the air like shattered glass, each piece cutting deeper than the last. I stood there in my own living room, holding a tray of freshly baked cookies I'd made for what I thought would be a wedding planning session, and felt my entire world tilt sideways. My name is Patricia, though my son has always called me Mom with a warmth that used to make me feel like the luckiest woman alive. I'm 53 years old, a widow of 7 years, and until that moment, I thought I knew exactly who I was and where I stood in my family's life. I was wrong about so many things. Let me take you back to where this all began, because betrayal doesn't happen in a single moment. It builds slowly, like water eroding stone, until one day you realize the foundation you've been standing on has crumbled beneath your feet. My son Dylan was my world after his father passed. Marcus, my husband, died of a sudden heart attack when Dylan was just 19, away at college studying architecture. I remember getting the call from the hospital, remember the way the phone felt heavy as lead in my hand, remember thinking that if I just didn't say the words out loud it wouldn't be real. But it was real. Devastatingly, irreversibly real. Dylan came home for the funeral and stayed for 6 months. He put his dreams on hold to make sure I was okay, to help me navigate the impossible maze of grief and paperwork and learning to be alone. We grew closer during those months than we'd ever been. He was my rock, my reason to get up in the morning, my proof that Marcus and I had created something beautiful and lasting in this world. Eventually, Dylan went back to school. I encouraged him, practically pushed him out the door because I knew Marcus would have wanted him to finish his degree, to build the life he dreamed of. And Dylan thrived. He graduated with honors, got a job at a prestigious firm in the city, and slowly built the career his father would have been so proud of. 4 years ago, he met Sienna. I'll never forget the first time Dylan brought her to my house for Sunday dinner. She was beautiful in that effortless way some women have, with long dark hair and eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. She smiled at me, complimented my home, and brought an expensive bottle of wine I later discovered cost more than I spent on groceries in a week. "Mom, this is Sienna," Dylan said, and the way he looked at her made my heart ache with happiness. It was the same way Marcus used to look at me. That first dinner was lovely. Sienna talked about her work in marketing, about growing up in Connecticut, about her parents who were both successful attorneys. She asked me about my life, seemed genuinely interested in my stories about Dylan as a child, laughed at all the right moments. When they left, she hugged me and said, "I can see where Dylan gets his warmth from." I went to bed that night thanking Marcus, wherever he was, for sending our son someone special. The warning signs were there from the beginning, but I didn't want to see them. Or maybe I did see them and chose to believe they meant something different than they actually did. Sienna would cancel plans at the last minute, always with a reasonable excuse. A work emergency, a friend's crisis, a migraine. Dylan would show up at my house alone, apologetic, assuring me she really did want to be there. I'd smile and say I understood because I did understand. I knew about demanding careers and obligations. But then there were the holidays. That first Thanksgiving, Sienna went to her parents' house in Connecticut. "It's tradition," Dylan explained. "She goes to her family for Thanksgiving, and we'll all be together for Christmas." Except Christmas came and Sienna had the flu. New Year's Eve she had a work retreat. Easter she was traveling for business. My birthday came and went with a card mailed 2 weeks late. I started to feel like a puzzle piece that didn't quite fit, like I was being gently but firmly pressed to the edges of Dylan's new life. But every time doubt crept in, Dylan would call, would visit, would tell me how much Sienna liked me, how she always asked about me, how busy she was but how she really cared. And I believed him because I needed to believe him, because the alternative was too painful to consider. 2 years into their relationship, Dylan proposed. He called me immediately after Sienna said yes, his voice trembling with excitement. "Mom, I'm getting married. I wish Dad could be here to see this." "He is here," I told him, tears streaming down my face. "He's always here, and he's so proud of you." Dylan asked if I would help with the wedding planning. "Sienna wants you involved," he said. "She thinks of you as family." Those words were like sunlight after a long winter. I had been so worried about being pushed out, about losing my son to his new life, and here he was inviting me in. Here was Sienna, wanting me to be part of their special day. I threw myself into wedding planning with the kind of enthusiasm I hadn't felt since before Marcus died. I researched venues, collected magazine clippings, started a Pinterest board full of ideas. I called Dylan weekly to discuss options, to get updates on what he and Sienna were thinking. But Sienna was never available for those calls. She was always at work or in a meeting or dealing with something urgent. Dylan would relay her opinions secondhand. She likes the garden venue idea. Or, she's thinking we should do a destination wedding. Or she wants to keep things small and intimate. The plans kept shifting. One week it was a spring wedding, then summer, then fall, then maybe next spring. The guest list grew and shrank like a living thing. Details were decided and then undecided. Every time I thought we were making progress, something would change. These things take time, Dylan assured me when I gently expressed frustration. We want everything to be perfect. I understood that. I wanted everything to be perfect too. So I waited and I helped when asked and I tried not to push. Then came the day that changed everything. It was a Tuesday in October, unseasonably warm. The kind of day where you can smell the last gasps of summer mixing with the promise of fall. I had spent the morning baking, making my famous chocolate chip cookies because Dylan had mentioned during our last call that he and Sienna might stop by to discuss some wedding details. I'd cleaned the house until it sparkled. I'd set out my good china, the set Marcus and I had received as a wedding gift and only used for special occasions. I'd arranged fresh flowers in the vase Dylan made for me in a pottery class when he was 12. Everything was perfect. Dylan arrived right on time, but he was alone. Again. Where's Sienna? I asked, trying to keep the disappointment out of my voice. She's parking the car, he said, but something in his tone made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. He wouldn't meet my eyes. 5 minutes later, Sienna walked in, and I knew immediately that something was different. She moved through my home like she owned it, not in a comfortable way but in a claiming way. Her eyes swept over my carefully arranged cookies, my good china, my fresh flowers, and something flickered across her face. Not quite contempt, but close. Patricia, she said. And it was the first time she'd ever used my first name instead of calling me Mom or Mrs. Morrison. We need to talk. My stomach clenched. I looked at Dylan, searching his face for clues, but he was staring at the floor like a child who knows he's about to disappoint someone he loves. Of course, I said, gesturing to the living room. Please sit down. I'll pour some tea. That won't be necessary, Sienna said. She remained standing, and Dylan stood beside her like a soldier at attention. I felt something cold settling into my bones, but I smiled anyway. I'd learned how to smile through pain when Marcus died. Well, what did you want to discuss? Have you set a date? I saw the most beautiful venue last week that I think would be perfect for a spring wedding. That's when Sienna said it. There won't be a spring wedding, Patricia. Her voice was measured, careful, like she was explaining something to a not very bright child. We got married yesterday. The world stopped. The clock on the wall kept ticking, but I couldn't hear it anymore. All I could hear was the rushing of blood in my ears, the thundering of my heart, the sound of something fundamental breaking inside me. What? The word came out as barely a whisper. We got married yesterday, she repeated, and this time I heard satisfaction in her voice. It was a small ceremony, very intimate, just immediate family. I looked at Dylan. My son. My baby. The boy I'd raised, the man I'd held together when his father died, the person I'd loved more than my own life. Dylan. He finally looked at me, and there were tears in his eyes. But he didn't speak. He didn't defend me. He didn't explain. He just stood there letting his wife, this woman I barely knew, deliver the news that shattered my heart into 1,000 pieces. But I'm immediate family, I heard myself say. The words sounded pathetic even to my own ears. Sienna's smile was sharp enough to cut. Immediate family means parents, Patricia. My parents were there. Dylan's father has passed, so... She shrugged, the gesture dismissive and final. The room tilted. I reached for the back of the couch to steady myself. Dylan, tell me this isn't true. Tell me you didn't get married without telling me. Tell me this is some kind of misunderstanding. Mom, he started, and his voice cracked on the word. Mom, I'm sorry. I wanted to tell you, but Sienna thought it would be easier this way, she interrupted smoothly. Wedding planning was taking forever, and honestly, Patricia, you were making it more complicated than it needed to be. All those ideas, all those suggestions, all that involvement. We wanted something simple, and with you in the mix it was just going to become this big production. Each word was a knife. I looked at the cookies I'd baked, at the china I'd set out, at the flowers I'd arranged, and felt like the world's biggest fool. How long had they been planning this? How long had they been laughing at me behind my back while I collected magazine clippings and researched venues? I don't understand, I said, and I hated how small my voice sounded. I thought you wanted me involved. You said you wanted me to help. That was months ago, Sienna said. Plans change. People change. We realized we wanted something different. But I'm his mother. The words came out broken, desperate. And I'm his wife. Sienna moved closer to Dylan, linked her arm through his. And from now on I come first. I looked at my son, searched his face for any sign of the boy who had held my hand at his father's funeral, who had stayed home from school to take care of me when I had pneumonia, who had once told me I was the strongest person he knew. But that boy was gone. In his place stood a man I didn't recognize, a man who had chosen to hurt me in a way I never thought possible. Did you ever actually plan to have a wedding that I was invited to? I asked. Or was this always the plan? Dylan opened his mouth, but again Sienna answered for him. Does it really matter now? It's done. We're married. We wanted you to know, which is why we came here today. But we're not going to apologize for making our own choices about our own wedding. I would have been happy with anything, I said, tears finally spilling down my cheeks. I would have been happy with a courthouse ceremony if you just told me. If you just included me. I'm not asking for much, Sienna. I'm just asking to be part of my son's life. And you are part of his life, she said, her tone softening just enough to sound almost kind, which somehow made it worse. But you have to understand that things are different now. Dylan has a wife. We're building our own family, our own traditions. We need space to do that. Space. The word hung in the air like a prison sentence. Dylan finally found his voice. Mom, please don't cry. I didn't want to hurt you. Sienna's right. We needed to do this our way. Your way, I repeated. Your way was to exclude me completely from one of the most important days of your life? He flinched but didn't deny it. I looked at them standing there together, a united front against me, and something inside me finally broke all the way through. Not just my heart, but something deeper. My illusions. My delusions. My desperate need to believe that I still mattered in my son's life. I think you should leave, I said quietly. Sienna looked almost relieved. Dylan looked panicked. Mom, don't. Leave, I repeated, stronger this time. Both of you. Now. Mom, please, let's talk about this. There's nothing to talk about, Dylan. You made your choice. You chose to humiliate me, to exclude me, to treat me like I'm nothing more than an inconvenience in your new life. That's fine. You're an adult. You can make your own choices. But I can make mine too, and right now, I'm choosing to ask you to leave my home. Sienna grabbed her purse, ready to go, but Dylan hesitated. For a moment I thought he might actually apologize, might actually show some remorse for what he'd done. But then Sienna tugged his arm, and he followed her like a puppet on a string. At the door he turned back. Mom, I love you. I hope you can understand someday. I didn't answer. I just closed the door behind them and stood in my empty house, surrounded by untouched cookies and flowers that suddenly seemed to mock me with their cheerfulness. That night was the longest of my life. Longer even than the night Marcus died. Because at least then I'd had Dylan. At least then I hadn't been completely alone. I didn't sleep. I sat in Marcus's chair, the one I'd kept all these years even though it took up too much space in the living room, and I talked to him like he was still there. Did I do something wrong? I asked the empty air. Did I push too hard? Was I too involved? Am I really such a burden that our son couldn't even tell me he was getting married? The silence was my only answer. As the sun came up, painting my living room in shades of gold and pink, something shifted inside me. The crushing grief began to crystallize into something harder, sharper. Anger. Not the hot, explosive kind, but the cold, calculating kind that comes when you realize you've been played for a fool. I thought about every canceled plan, every last-minute excuse, every time Sienna had been too busy to see me. I thought about how carefully she'd orchestrated this, how methodically she'd pushed me to the edges of Dylan's life. This wasn't spontaneous. This wasn't about wanting a simple wedding. This was deliberate. And Dylan had let it happen. I made coffee strong and black and sat down at my computer. If I was going to be pushed out of my son's life, I was at least going to understand why. I started with social media. Sienna's profiles were private, but I found her company website, her LinkedIn, mentions of her in various professional articles. She was successful, impressive, exactly the kind of woman I thought Dylan needed. But as I dug deeper, I started to see a pattern. She'd been engaged before. Twice, actually. Both times to successful men from good families. Both engagements had ended abruptly, and in both cases the ex-fiancés had moved away shortly after, cutting ties with their families and friends. I found one old blog post from a woman claiming to be the sister of one of the ex-fiancés, talking about how her brother had changed after meeting Sienna, how he'd slowly distanced himself from his family, how by the time they broke up, he was a shell of himself. The post had been deleted, but I'd found it cached on an old website. I read it 3 times, my blood running colder with each read. This was a pattern. This was what Sienna did. She found successful men, isolated them from their families, and then, what? I wasn't sure yet, but I knew it wasn't good. I spent the next week digging, researching, becoming someone I never thought I'd be. I found forums where people talked about cutting off toxic family members, and in several of them I recognized details from Dylan's life. The son whose mother couldn't let go. The mother-in-law who wouldn't accept boundaries. The stories were written by the wives, painting themselves as victims of overbearing in-laws, and the other forum members offered sympathy and advice on how to further distance their husbands from their families. One username appeared across multiple forums, Sienna Grace. I sat back from my computer feeling sick. It was all there. Years of posts about her previous relationships, about training men to prioritize their wives over everyone else, about the proper way to handle interfering families. And now she was doing it to Dylan. But why? That was what I couldn't figure out. She had her own money, her own career, her own life. What did she gain from isolating these men? The answer came from an unexpected source. I received a friend request on Facebook from someone named Jeremy Walsh. The name didn't ring any bells, but his profile picture showed a handsome man in his late 30s with sad eyes. His bio said he lived in Portland. I accepted the request, curiosity overriding caution. Within minutes he sent me a message. Mrs. Morrison, I hope this doesn't freak you out, but I needed to reach out to you. I'm one of Sienna's ex-fiancés. I saw your name mentioned in some wedding news my sister found online, and I felt I had to warn you about what you're dealing with. My hand shook as I typed back. Please tell me everything. Jeremy's story made my blood run cold. He'd met Sienna 6 years ago at a professional conference. She'd been charming, intelligent, seemingly perfect. They'd gotten engaged after 8 months. But then things started to change. She wanted me to cut ties with my mother, he wrote. She said my mom was toxic, that she didn't respect our relationship, that she would always try to come between us. First, I thought she was just setting healthy boundaries, but then it got more extreme. She wanted me to stop talking to my sister, my childhood friends, anyone who questioned our relationship. She wanted total control. What did you do? I asked. I almost went through with it, he admitted. I was so deep in her manipulation that I couldn't see straight. But 2 weeks before the wedding, my mom showed up at my apartment. She was crying, begging me to talk to her, asking what she'd done wrong. And seeing her like that, so broken, something clicked. I realized what I was doing, what Sienna had made me do. I called off the wedding that night. How did she react? Like I'd betrayed her. She called me every name in the book, threatened to ruin my reputation, told everyone I cheated on her. I ended up moving to Portland to start over, away from all the toxicity. Best decision I ever made, but it took me 2 years of therapy to fully recover. I stared at his words, seeing Dylan's future laid out in stark detail. Is there something wrong with her? Psychologically. My therapist said she has narcissistic personality disorder with some antisocial traits. She doesn't see other people as real human beings with their own needs and feelings. We're all just supporting characters in her story, and if we don't play our assigned roles perfectly, we get written out. She's doing this to my son, I typed, tears blurring my vision. She married him yesterday without telling me. She's been pushing me out of his life for years. I'm so sorry, Jeremy wrote. But I have to warn you, Mrs. Morrison. You're not going to be able to just tell Dylan the truth and have him believe you. She's had years to work on him to make him see you the way she wants him to see you. If you come at him directly with this, she'll twist it, make you look like the crazy, jealous mother who can't let go. You'll only push him further away. Then what do? I felt desperate, helpless. I can't just watch her destroy my son. You have to be smarter than her, Jeremy said. You have to be patient. And you have to document everything. Because eventually she'll slip up. Eventually Dylan will see through her. And when he does, he's going to need proof that he wasn't crazy, that his instincts were right. You need to be ready with that proof. We talked for hours that day. Jeremy gave me details, stories, patterns to watch for. He told me about the other ex-fiancé, Marcus, which made me shudder because it was my late husband's name, who had apparently been so broken by Sienna that he'd cut off his entire family and moved to Australia. He told me about the warning signs Dylan would eventually start to show. Isolation, personality changes, financial control issues. She likes to have complete control over finances, Jeremy explained. She'll want access to all his accounts, will want to make all major decisions together, which really means she makes them and he agrees. If Dylan has any inheritance or savings, watch that carefully. I lost $75,000 to her before I got out. My blood ran cold. Marcus had left Dylan a substantial life insurance policy. Plus there was a trust fund from Marcus's parents. Dylan had never been motivated by money, had barely touched those funds, preferring to make his own way. But they were there, waiting. What else should I look for? I asked. She'll start pushing for major life changes. Moving to a new city, switching jobs, anything that further isolates him from his support system. She'll make it sound reasonable, like career opportunities or a fresh start, but really it's about control. And if you try to stop it, you'll just look controlling yourself. I thanked Jeremy profusely for reaching out, for giving me the information I needed. After we said goodbye, I sat in the growing darkness of my living room and tried to figure out my next move. I couldn't confront Dylan directly. Jeremy was right about that. But I couldn't just sit back and do nothing either. So I decided to do what Jeremy suggested. Document, watch, and wait for my opportunity. The next 2 months were torture. Dylan called twice, both times with Sienna in the background. The conversations were stilted, awkward, full of long pauses and careful words. He asked how I was doing. I said I was fine. He told me about work, about their new apartment, about trivial things that meant nothing. Neither of us mentioned the wedding. I'd love for you to see the apartment sometime, he said during the second call. Maybe you could come over for dinner? Maybe, I said, not committing. Let me check my schedule. I could hear Sienna's voice in the background, though I couldn't make out the words. Dylan's responses were quiet, submissive. Yeah, okay. No, you're right. Yeah, I'll ask her. Mom, he said, coming back to the phone. Actually, before you come over, Sienna and I wanted to talk to you about something. About setting some healthy boundaries going forward. There it was. The script Sienna had written for him. Boundaries, I repeated flatly. Yeah, like, we want you to call before you come over. And maybe we could set up a regular schedule for visits, like once a month, so it doesn't feel so unpredictable. Once a month. I was being scheduled like a dentist appointment. Of course, I said, my voice calm despite the rage building in my chest. Whatever makes you comfortable, Dylan. Thanks, Mom. I knew you'd understand. You're the best. I wasn't the best. I was the most heartbroken, the most helpless, the most desperate. But I was learning to play the game. Dylan, I said before he could hang up. I love you. No matter what. Remember that. There was a long pause. I love you too, Mom. I cried after that call, ugly sobs that shook my whole body. But when I was done crying, I got back to work. I started keeping a journal, documenting every interaction, every conversation, every odd detail. I noted the times Dylan called, always when Sienna was around, the topics he avoided, anything about the wedding, anything about his feelings, the changes in his speech patterns, more formal, less warm, filled with therapy speak about boundaries and self-care. I also started building a file. I printed out Jeremy's messages. I saved screenshots of Sienna Grace forum posts. I researched narcissistic abuse and isolation tactics. I documented everything I could find about Sienna's past relationships. And I waited. Christmas came. Dylan called to say they were going to Sienna's parents' house in Connecticut. Maybe we can celebrate when we get back, he suggested. Of course, I said. Have a wonderful time. I spent Christmas alone, eating takeout Chinese food and watching old movies, Marcus's sweater wrapped around my shoulders like a hug. New Year's came. No call from Dylan. January brought bitter cold and a surprise. Dylan showed up at my door on a Tuesday evening alone. Hi, Mom, he said, and he looked terrible. Tired, thin, older than his 29 years. Dylan. I stood back to let him in, my heart racing. Is everything okay? Yeah, fine. I was in the neighborhood and thought I'd stop by. Is that okay? I know I didn't call first. You never need to call first, I said firmly. This is always your home. He looked around the living room like he was seeing it for the first time, or maybe seeing it again after a long absence. His eyes landed on Marcus's chair, still in its place by the window. You kept Dad's chair, he said softly. Of course I kept it. It's where he sat every evening to read the paper. It's where you sat when you came home from college and told me about your dreams. Why would I get rid of it? Dylan's eyes filled with tears. Sienna says I need to stop living in the past. She says keeping all these memories around is unhealthy, that I need to move forward. I moved carefully like I was approaching a wounded animal. What do you think? I don't know anymore, he said, sinking onto the couch. I don't know what I think about anything. This was it. This was my chance. But I had to be careful, so careful. Tell me what's going on, sweetie, I said, sitting beside him but not too close. And he did. Once he started talking, it all came pouring out. How Sienna wanted him to quit his job and work for her father's law firm doing estate planning, instead of the architectural work he loved. How she'd opened credit cards in his name without telling him. How she monitored his phone calls and got upset if he talked to anyone without telling her first. How she'd suggested they move to Connecticut to be closer to her family. But every time I try to talk to her about how I'm feeling, she tells me I'm being selfish, Dylan said. She says marriage is about compromise, about putting your spouse first. And she's right, isn't she? I should want to make her happy. What about your happiness? I asked gently. I am happy, he said automatically, but his face told a different story. Dylan, can I ask you something? And I want you to really think about your answer before you respond. He nodded. When was the last time you made a decision, any decision, without checking with Sienna first? He opened his mouth, then closed it. Thought for a long moment. I don't know. When was the last time you saw your friends from college? Or talked to your cousin Rachel? Or did anything just because you wanted to do it? His face crumpled. She says they're not good for me. She says my friends are immature, that Rachel is a bad influence, that I need to focus on building our future together. And what do you say? I say she's probably right. She's usually right about things. I wanted to scream. I wanted to shake him, to tell him to wake up and see what was happening to him. But I knew that would only drive him back to Sienna. So instead, I did something different. Dylan, I'm going to tell you a story about your father. He looked up surprised. When your dad and I first got married, we were young and stupid and so in love it hurt. And my mother, your grandmother, didn't like him. She thought he was too ambitious, too focused on his career, not stable enough for me. She told me I was making a mistake, that I should leave him and find someone more traditional. But you didn't, Dylan said. No, I didn't. Because even though your grandmother had her concerns, she never once tried to control me. She never monitored my phone calls or told me who I could be friends with. She never tried to isolate me from the people I loved. She just expressed her concerns and then let me make my own choice. That's what people who love you do, Dylan. They trust you to make your own decisions. He was quiet for a long time. Then, are you saying Sienna doesn't love me? I'm saying that love shouldn't feel like a cage. It shouldn't require you to give up everything that makes you who you are. Your father loved me fiercely, but he never once asked me to be anything other than myself. That's what real love looks like. Dylan wiped his eyes. I'm so confused, Mom. I don't know what's real anymore. I know, baby. I know. But you don't have to figure it all out tonight. You just have to be honest with yourself about how you feel. We talked for 2 more hours. I didn't badmouth Sienna. I didn't present my evidence or share Jeremy's warnings. I just listened and asked gentle questions and reminded Dylan of who he used to be before Sienna reshaped him into someone else. When he left, he hugged me for a long time. I've missed you, Mom. I've missed you too. And Dylan? Whatever you decide, whatever you do, I'm here. Always. No boundaries, no schedules, no conditions. That's what mothers do. He nodded and left, and I stood at the window watching his car disappear into the night, praying I'd done enough. 3 days later, Dylan called. Sienna answered his phone. Patricia, we need to talk about your conversation with Dylan. My blood ran cold. Excuse me. Dylan told me everything you said to him. About how I'm supposedly controlling, about how our marriage is unhealthy. I want you to know that your manipulation won't work. I didn't manipulate anyone. I listened to my son. You planted doubts in his head. You tried to turn him against me. But it won't work, Patricia. Dylan and I are stronger than your sad attempts to come between us. Sienna, I have no interest in coming between you. But I do have an interest in my son's well-being. Your son is fine. Better than fine. He's thriving in our marriage. The problem is you can't accept that he doesn't need you anymore. The words hit like a physical blow, but I kept my voice steady. If that's what you think, then there's nothing more to say. Oh, there's one more thing. Dylan and I have decided it's best if you have minimal contact with us for a while. Just until you can learn to respect our marriage and stop trying to interfere. You mean until I learn to stay silent while you destroy him? I mean until you learn your place. Goodbye, Patricia. She hung up. I stood there holding the phone, shaking with rage and fear and heartbreak. But this time I didn't just cry. I called Jeremy. She's accelerating, he said when I told him what happened. That's what happened with me too. Right after I started questioning things, she moved fast to isolate me completely before I could wake up fully. This is actually a good sign. How is this good? I demanded. Because it means Dylan is starting to see through her, and she knows it. She's scared, Patricia. And people like Sienna make mistakes when they're scared. What do? You wait for the mistake. And you stay ready. The mistake came 6 weeks later, in the form of a panicked phone call at 2 in the morning. Mom. Dylan's voice was barely recognizable. Mom, I need help. I was out of bed in seconds. What's wrong? Where are you? I'm at a hotel. I left. Couldn't. I found something, Mom. Something bad. I'm coming to get you. Tell me where you are. 20 minutes later, I pulled up to a cheap hotel on the edge of town. Dylan was sitting on the curb outside, still in his work clothes, looking lost and broken. He got in my car without a word. I drove us back to my house in silence, letting him gather his thoughts. Inside, I made tea while he sat at the kitchen table, his hands shaking. I found a box, he finally said. In our storage unit. A box full of documents. Bank statements, emails, legal papers. Mom, she's been stealing from me. She's got access to Dad's trust fund, to the life insurance money, and she's been moving it into accounts I didn't even know existed. I sat down across from him, my heart pounding. How much? Over $200,000. Maybe more. I'm still trying to figure it all out. He looked up at me with devastated eyes. But that's not even the worst part. I found emails between her and her friend. They were laughing about me, Mom. About how easy I was to manipulate, how she had me completely under her thumb. She called me her golden goose. She said I was even easier than her last 2 fiancés. There it was. The truth laid bare. There were others, he asked. She was engaged before? Yes, I said quietly. Twice. And she did the same thing to both of them. You knew. His voice cracked. How long have you known? Since a few weeks after your wedding. One of her ex-fiancés reached out to me. He warned me about her, told me about the pattern. I've been researching, documenting, waiting for the right moment to tell you. Why didn't you tell me right away? There was hurt in his voice, but also understanding starting to dawn. Because you wouldn't have believed me. She had you so turned around, so convinced that I was the problem. If I'd come to you with accusations, she would have twisted it, made me look like the jealous mother trying to ruin your happiness. You would have cut me off completely, and then I wouldn't have been able to help you at all when you finally saw the truth. Dylan dropped his head into his hands. I'm such an idiot. I let her turn me against you. I let her isolate me from everyone who actually cared about me. I believed every lie she told. You're not an idiot, I said firmly, moving to put my hand on his shoulder. You're a victim of a very skilled manipulator. This is what she does, Dylan. She finds good men and she breaks them down until they don't know which way is up. But you saw through her. That's what matters. I almost didn't, he said, his voice breaking. If I hadn't gone to the storage unit looking for some old files for work, if I hadn't accidentally found that box, I might have never known. She would have taken everything and I would have just let her. But you did find it. And now we're going to fix this. He looked up at me, tears streaming down his face. How? How do I fix this mess? First, you're going to stay here tonight. Tomorrow we're going to call a lawyer. Then we're going to gather every piece of evidence we can find. And then we're going to make sure Sienna faces consequences for what she's done. She's going to make this ugly, Dylan said. She's going to tell everyone I'm abusive, that I'm the problem. She's already started posting things on social media about how hard it is to be married to someone with mental health issues. My jaw clenched. Let her. We have the truth on our side. And Dylan, I want you to know something. I've been documenting everything. Every strange behavior, every red flag, every conversation. I've been in touch with her ex-fiancé who went through the exact same thing. We have evidence, testimony, a clear pattern of fraud and emotional abuse. She can tell whatever lies she wants, but we have the truth. He stared at me. You've been building a case against her this whole time? I've been protecting my son, I corrected gently. I knew she would slip up eventually. I knew you would see through her eventually. And I wanted to make sure that when you did, we'd have everything we needed to get you free. I'm so sorry, Mom, he said when he could finally speak again. I'm so sorry for excluding you from the wedding, for treating you like you didn't matter, for believing her lies about you. I'm so sorry. I know, baby. I know. And I forgive you. I forgave you the moment it happened because I knew it wasn't really you. It was her poisoning your mind against me. I don't deserve you, he said. Yes, you do. You deserve a mother who fights for you, who never gives up on you, who sees through the manipulation and waits patiently for you to find your way back. That's what I've been doing, and I'd do it again in a heartbeat. We stayed up the rest of that night, going through everything Dylan had found, making plans, calling Jeremy to get advice. By the time the sun came up, we had a strategy. The next morning, I called the best divorce attorney in the city, a woman named Margaret Shun who had a reputation for handling complex fraud cases. Dylan's story intrigued her immediately. This is textbook financial abuse combined with coercive control, she said after hearing the details. And if you have documentation of her doing this to previous partners, we can establish a pattern that will make prosecution much easier. Criminal prosecution? Dylan looked pale. Mr. Morrison, your wife has stolen over $200,000 from you. That's felony theft. She's also likely committed fraud by opening accounts in your name without permission. These aren't just civil matters. These are crimes. The next few weeks were a whirlwind. Margaret moved fast, filing for emergency divorce and getting a restraining order that prevented Sienna from accessing any more of Dylan's accounts. We discovered the total theft was actually closer to $300,000. She'd been siphoning money for over a year, bit by bit, thinking Dylan would never notice. Sienna fought back exactly as we'd expected. She posted on social media about her abusive husband, who had abandoned her. She called Dylan's work claiming he was having a mental breakdown. She even showed up at my house at 3 in the morning, screaming and pounding on the door, claiming I'd brainwashed her husband. I called the police. They arrested her for violating the restraining order. That arrest, combined with her increasingly erratic behavior, only strengthened our case. Margaret also put us in touch with a detective who specialized in financial crimes. With Jeremy's testimony and the documentation I'd gathered, they were able to establish that Sienna had done this before, taking money from her previous fiancés, then disappearing before they could take legal action. But Dylan wasn't going to let her disappear this time. The divorce proceedings were brutal. Sienna brought in a high-powered attorney paid for by her parents, and they tried every trick in the book. They claimed Dylan had given her access to the money willingly. They claimed he was mentally unstable and imagining things. They tried to paint me as a controlling mother who had manipulated her vulnerable son. But we had something they didn't: the truth backed by hard evidence. We had bank records showing unauthorized transfers. We had emails between Sienna and her friend laughing about the scam. We had testimony from Jeremy about identical behavior. We had my documentation of her isolation tactics and emotional manipulation. The judge saw through her lies quickly. Not only did he grant the divorce, but he ordered Sienna to repay every penny she'd stolen, with interest. He also referred the case to the district attorney's office for criminal prosecution. Sienna's parents tried to settle, offering to pay back the money if we dropped the criminal charges. Margaret looked at Dylan. "It's your choice. We can take the money and be done with it, or we can pursue justice and make sure she faces consequences." Dylan didn't hesitate. "Justice. She needs to face consequences so she can't do this to anyone else." The criminal trial took 8 months. Sienna was eventually convicted of theft and fraud and sentenced to 3 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 18 months. Her attorney, her parents, everyone tried to paint her as the victim, but the evidence was overwhelming. When the verdict was read, Dylan reached over and squeezed my hand. I looked at my son, my strong, brave son who had found his way back from the darkness, and felt my heart swell with pride. But the real healing took longer than any court case. Dylan moved back in with me for a while, needing time to figure out who he was without Sienna's voice in his head. We went to therapy together and separately. He reconnected with his old friends, called his cousin Rachel, slowly rebuilt all the relationships Sienna had convinced him to destroy. He also wrote letters to Sienna's ex-fiancés, apologizing for not believing them sooner, thanking them for their courage in coming forward. Jeremy came to visit once and he and Dylan talked for hours. Watching them share their experiences, seeing Dylan realize he wasn't alone, was one of the most beautiful things I've ever witnessed. "You saved my life, you know," Dylan told me one night about 6 months after the trial ended. We were sitting in the living room, him in Marcus's chair, me on the couch with my knitting. "You saved your own life," I corrected. "I just held the door open so you could find your way back. You did more than that. You could have given up on me. After the way I treated you, after the wedding, after everything, you could have walked away and no one would have blamed you. But you didn't. You fought for me even when I didn't deserve it. You always deserved it, Dylan. Always. You're my son. That doesn't come with conditions." He was quiet for a moment. Then, "I think about Dad a lot lately, about what he would think of all this." "He'd be proud of you," I said. "So incredibly proud. Not because you got out, but because you had the courage to admit you were wrong, to face what happened, and to make sure no one else got hurt the way you were hurt. I wish he was here." "He is here," I said, gesturing around the room. "He's in this house, in my memories, in you. Every good thing about you, your kindness, your integrity, your strength, that's Marcus." She tried to bury those things, but she couldn't destroy them because they're part of who you are at your core. Dylan wiped his eyes. "I want to do something. Something to help other people who are going through what I went through. I've been thinking about starting a support group or maybe a foundation. Something that helps people recognize emotional abuse and financial exploitation in relationships." "I think that's a beautiful idea," I said. "And I'll help you any way I can." That was 2 years ago. Today, Dylan has his own apartment, a good therapist, and a thriving support group that meets twice a month. He's dating again, carefully and slowly, and I've met his girlfriend, a lovely woman named Amber who works as a teacher and has a laugh that fills a room with warmth. She loves his friends, encourages his relationship with me, and has her own full life that she's excited to share with him, not subsume him into. The Marcus Morrison Foundation for Abuse Awareness has helped over 300 people recognize and escape emotionally abusive relationships. Dylan speaks at events, shares his story, and uses his pain to help others heal. I've never been more proud of him. As for me, I learned something important through all of this. I learned that loving someone sometimes means stepping back and letting them make their own mistakes, but it also means being ready to catch them when they fall. It means fighting for them even when they don't know they need fighting for. It means being patient, strategic and unshakable in your belief that the person you love is still in there somewhere, under all the lies and manipulation. I learned that mothers have a unique kind of strength. We're not loud or showy about it. We don't demand recognition. We just do what needs to be done day after day, year after year, because that's what love looks like. Sienna was released on parole 6 months ago. She moved back to Connecticut, and last I heard, she's working in her father's law firm under a very tight leash. Her parents apparently finally saw through her after the trial, and they've made it clear that any more schemes will result in complete financial cutoff. Whether she's actually changed or just gotten better at hiding her true nature, I don't know. I hope for everyone's sake that she got help, but I'm not holding my breath. Dylan still has hard days. He has nightmares sometimes about the marriage, about all the money that's gone, about the year of his life he'll never get back. But he's healing. Slowly, steadily, he's becoming himself again. The bright, kind, ambitious man his father and I raised him to be. And our relationship? It's stronger than ever. We have Sunday dinners again. This time with no exclusions and no ulterior motives. Just a mother and son enjoying each other's company, often joined by Amber, sometimes by friends from Dylan's support group. My house is full of laughter and love again, the way it used to be, the way Marcus would have wanted it to be. Sometimes Dylan apologizes again for the wedding, for excluding me from that day. I always tell him the same thing. That wasn't you. That was a man trapped in someone else's nightmare. And besides, we can't change the past. We can only build a better future. Still, he said last Sunday, helping me clear the dinner dishes while Amber and Rachel chatted in the living room, I wish I could give you a do-over. A wedding where you're included, where you're celebrated the way you should have been. You being here, being healthy and happy and free, that's all the celebration I need. I told him. That's the only gift that matters. But Dylan, being the thoughtful man he is, surprised me last month on my 60th birthday. He organized a party at his apartment, invited all my friends and our extended family, and halfway through the evening, he stood up to make a toast. Most people think this is just Mom's birthday party, he said. But it's actually more than that. It's a celebration of the strongest, bravest, most loving person I know. 2 years ago I was lost. I was under the control of someone who wanted to destroy me, and I pushed away the one person who could save me. But Mom didn't give up. She waited, she planned, she documented, and when I finally woke up, she was there with everything I needed to get free. She fought for me when I couldn't fight for myself. She loved me when I didn't deserve it. She's the reason I'm standing here today, healthy and whole and happy. He turned to me, tears in his eyes. So this isn't just a birthday party, Mom. It's a thank you. It's an apology. It's a celebration of you and everything you sacrificed to bring me home. I love you more than words can say. And I promise you, I will spend the rest of my life making sure you know how grateful I am. There wasn't a dry eye in the room. I hugged my son, this man I'd fought so hard for, and felt Marcus's presence all around us, proud and loving and finally at peace. So did I do the right thing? Did I handle Sienna's manipulation the right way? I think about that sometimes. Maybe I should have confronted Dylan sooner, should have shown him the evidence earlier, should have forced the issue before she could steal so much money. But then I remember what Jeremy told me. Coming at Dylan directly would have only pushed him deeper into Sienna's control. I remember how carefully I had to move, how patient I had to be, how much I had to trust that my son would eventually see the truth. Would I do it the same way if I had to do it again? Yes, absolutely yes. Because the alternative, losing Dylan forever, watching him disappear into Sienna's web with no way out, was unthinkable. I learned that sometimes love means playing the long game. It means swallowing your pride, accepting hurt, and waiting in the shadows until the moment is right. It means being smarter than the person trying to hurt your child, more patient, more strategic. I learned that a mother's love is the most powerful force in the universe. Not because it's loud or demanding, but because it's constant, unwavering, unbreakable. If you're going through something similar, if you're watching someone you love fall under the control of a manipulator, an abuser, someone who wants to isolate them from everyone who truly cares, please don't give up. Document everything. Build your case. Be patient. And most importantly, make sure that person knows you're always there, always waiting, always ready to help when they're ready to come home. Your love might be the only lifeline they have. Don't let go of it no matter how hard they pull away. Because someday they're going to need that lifeline. And when they reach for it, you need to be there, holding strong. That's what mothers do. That's what family does. That's what real unconditional love looks like. And to anyone who's ever been in Dylan's position, trapped in a relationship with someone who wants to control and isolate you, please know that it's not your fault. You're not weak. You're not stupid. You're a victim of psychological manipulation by someone who studied your vulnerabilities and exploited them. But you can get out. You can heal. You can rebuild your life and your relationships. It won't be easy. It will take courage and support and probably therapy and definitely time. But you're worth it. Your freedom is worth it. Your happiness is worth it. And to the Siennas of the world, the manipulators, the abusers, the people who see others as objects to be used and discarded, know that eventually the truth catches up with you. Eventually your victims wake up. Eventually you face consequences. And all the charm and manipulation in the world can't protect you from the justice you've earned. I sit here now in my living room, in the house I shared with Marcus, surrounded by memories both painful and beautiful. Dylan's photo from his support group's last event sits on the mantel, next to his father's picture. They have the same smile, the same kind eyes, the same strength that can't be broken no matter how hard someone tries. I think about the day Sienna told me they'd gotten married without me. I think about how broken I felt, how lost, how certain I was that I'd failed as a mother. And then I think about where we are now, Dylan thriving, Sienna facing consequences, our family stronger than ever. And I realize that sometimes the darkest moments are just the beginning of the story, not the end. We survived. We fought back. We won. And that's a story worth telling. Did you like my story? Which part moved you the most? Tell me in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more life stories like this. Have you ever dealt with a manipulative person in your family? Have you ever had to fight to save someone you love from an abusive relationship? Share your experiences. Sometimes just knowing we're not alone makes all the difference. Remember, you are stronger than you know, your love matters more than you realize, and it's never too late to fight for the people who matter most. With love and respect, Auntie Helen's Stories.